Take a pit stop for all things NASCAR with the Four Tire Change podcast. Here is your host, Dawson Iserlo.
All right, welcome back into Four Tire Change. Dawson Iserlo with you here on ESPN Southwest Louisiana. Where do we even start? Kansas. I mean, maybe the best race of the year. We thought Atlanta wasn't going to be able to be topped as far as fantastic finishes are concerned. We might have found our answer to that. Welcome back into the show. Excited to do this one solo, just kind of reactionary here. Pretty early Monday morning, just kind of, trying to absorb everything that happened yesterday in the NASCAR Cup Series and come up with some thoughts. It was really a fun night, and one that I think NASCAR and the Cup Series were in need of after, a stretch of the schedule that brought some races that were maybe not the best, some, package issues, aero blocking, a lot of different concerns, right? Things we've talked about on this podcast the last few weeks. Yesterday was in lack of all of those and just a source of great entertainment. And so you end up with a fantastic finish. Let's start and we'll work our way backwards, I guess. The finish is unreal. I mean, Kyle Larson and Chris Buescher drag race to the finish, and watching it live, I thought for sure that Buescher had it. And I think, kind of looking back at the replays, I think what made it look like that in real time is because Buescher was kind of on the apron. And so I just think the angle of which he was hitting that finish line from the way the camera was positioned, and again, I mean, what does this matter all that much? But just I think from the way the camera was positioned, it made it appear like he was ahead of Larson. And then when you see the straight angle right down the line there, which is, of course, NASCAR has their high-speed cameras that actually are what signals the finish, it was Larson. I mean, by 0.001, the closest finish in the history of the NASCAR Cup Series. And think about how long we've been doing these things for that to happen. And again, that was also the closest three-way finish we've ever had at Atlanta just, about a month or two ago. So unbelievable there. And man, you feel for Buescher, and it was interesting. The reactions were also kind of funny and I thought telling, right? Larson got out and was, obviously elated they won the race, but they, the radio originally told him that he had lost. And when he found out he lost, he went his reaction was kind of like, well, we gave it a great shot. That was fun. He was pretty high spirits. And Buescher, you saw, they talked to him on pit road afterwards, and his reaction was just, he was gutted. He was devastated. He wasn't even, he was kind of struggling to come up with stuff to say. And I think it kind of shows you the difference in teams. Like Kyle Larson, while he didn't want to lose that race, look, he runs for Hendrick. He's got a win already. He knows he's going to be in the mix for some more. Buescher and that RFK team, they need these wins. Like, they need a win, and they needed that one last night. And so you can tell the difference in kind of emotion there, because Buescher's not going to get out and go, that was a lot of fun, it's tough that we didn't win it. He was like just gutted. And, while he acknowledged the racing was good and it was, pretty clean too, you could just see the disappointment on his face. And it just goes to show you how the Cup Series is, right? And sometimes opportunities are plentiful for some, not for others. And last night, RFK felt like they had that one, and I thought they had it, and he thought they had it. And ultimately, it was not meant to be. Let's rewind a little bit in this race and see how we got there, right? The start of this thing was interesting. I watched a lot of the truck race on Saturday, and it was all over the place, man. Just every lane going at it. But I've kind of learned to temper my expectations when I see really good racing in the Truck Series or the Xfinity Series because of how different these cars are, right? And we just know these next-gen cars don't respond the same way that the trucks or the Xfinity cars do. So while the racing was really entertaining and all over the place, especially on restarts in the Truck Series, I kind of went into this going, we'll see. We'll see if that's what happens. Now, look, Kansas has been really good on the next-gen car, so it's not like I had a ton of reason to be pessimistic. But I was just a little concerned with this aero blocking thing. And, are we actually going to get good battles? Are people going to be able to pass? Or are we going to have a lot of guys, using track position to stay where they are? And as it turns out, none of those were an issue. Like I said, it was like the truck race. It was wild on the restarts, and you saw that early on. And then you saw those long battles for the lead. It was Chastain early on trying to hold off Christopher Bell. It's funny when you think about those two and how long they battled in that first stage, and they weren't even a factor at the end of this thing, right? And there's a couple different factors for that, and obviously some pit stop stuff, some track position, getting a little caught up in a couple incidents there, changed the race for a lot of these drivers. But they had a great battle for first place in the first stage and just going back and forth. And I was really impressed with the way that one car, look, he drives it so hard all the time. And, we know how others feel about how easy or not easy it is to pass him. But I thought that was great racing. And you said to yourself after that first stage or, kind of halfway through it, I think we're going to have a good race here. I think we're going to be all right. And that's exactly the case. Remember, this is a long rain delay as well. We didn't start this thing on time. We ended up with a nighttime finish, which was not supposed to be in the cards, right? But I don't complain when we get extra night racing. I tend to enjoy night racing a lot. So as this race plays out, stage 2, much of the same. Just great battles up front. A lot of cars in the mix. Denny Hamlin started to show he's going to be a factor in this race, and everything continued to be pretty competitive. Then we had the start of stage 3, and it's just a disaster, right? Caution after caution, wreck after wreck. These cars just didn't have any grip for whatever reason. And again, we talked about how the track was, or we heard about how the track was going to change throughout the day because, look, you're going with a completely clean track and all this stuff with the rain. Well, stage 3 just had literally, 20 or 30 caution laps right off the bat because nobody could get it going, and we couldn't get a run more than 3 laps. But then we finally did, and once we settled in, we had great action in stage 3, just like we did in stages 1 and 2. And this continued throughout, and obviously that kind of leads into this final stretch where, look, it looks like Denny Hamlin's going to win this thing. Now, the other thing that gets lost in the shuffle here, let's go back a bit to the first restart there at the end of the race. Hamlin's getting run down, and I think Hamlin's going to get caught and passed by his teammate Martin Truex Jr. And honestly, with the fuel mileage, because Hamlin and Buescher were both trying to save fuel, and you really didn't know, and then, Truex is, who doesn't have to save like those two, he kind of skyrockets through. Larson backed up. He didn't have the speed anymore. So Truex passes Buescher, passes Larson, gets into second, and it looks like he's going to run Hamlin down, and Hamlin's still worried about fuel mileage as well. So I thought that was going to be really, I wanted it to organically finish. Now, obviously, when you look back and you have the finish we had, I guess you can trade one for the other, right? Or we end up with this unreal finish. But that was going to be really, really interesting. Unfortunately for Truex, he ends up not having the greatest pit stop, restart, everything, the combinations, and he's not in the mix anymore. Denny was, and Denny kind of guessed wrong, right? He took the inside lane, and he said afterwards, easily, obviously I would have taken the outside if I could do it again. Larson split him 3 wide. We had some 5 wide stretches at times in this race. But ultimately, Denny kind of gets shuffled back, and then we have the battle between Buescher and Larson down the stretch, and Larson ends up winning the race. I mean, just fantastic. And again, it was a tough stretch of the last month or so with some races that weren't the best. And this was what NASCAR needed. And now you want to talk about momentum builder. You've got Darlington coming up, then the All-Star race in North Wilkesboro, which we'll see, but I think that's enough of a spectacle on its own, and it's so exciting to be back in North Wilkesboro. And then we got Charlotte after that with the Coke 600. Like, you've got a stretch of really, really good racing on this package, right, with these next-gen cars. So I'm excited. I'm kind of reinvigorated here. I was, not losing interest in the series the last month or so, but just kind of bummed about the way the races were going and, some of the lack of storylines. And by the way, it doesn't end the Hendrick Gibbs dominance today because the Hendrick car ends up winning, right? But an RFK car was, a millisecond away from winning this race. And that's at least hopeful that maybe, hey, the Fords can get something here. Maybe RFK found something today that, and I don't know how much of that they'll share with Penske, right? Say their teammates or their manufacturer mates. But maybe those other Fords can kind of see what happened there and make some adjustments. And maybe that can get us some more new storylines, new drivers getting up and winning races in the second half of the season at the intermediates, of course, outside of Suarez winning in Atlanta, which, by the way, we're not going to go too deep into some of the standings and results because I wanted to focus on the finish here, but Daniel Suarez, just a miserable set of results the past 2 months. He's got that win in his back pocket, though, so you can afford some time like that, but he wants to get back on the right track. That 99 team wants to win another race or two here down the stretch. All that being said, tremendous week in the NASCAR Cup Series. Cannot wait until Darlington next week. We'll have a lot about that one. Now let's talk about it real quick with Darlington. I think it's going to be fun. I think it's going to be, Darlington's been so good on this next-gen package, and I think the thing about Darlington is you have multiple lanes. You have an old-school racetrack. It's old-school NASCAR at its finest. We're going to have the throwback race as well, which I'm super excited to see all the paint schemes. We, of course, have already seen some. Hendrick's got something great lined up. Kind of paying homage to some past drivers. If you haven't seen that, go check it out. I think you'll enjoy it. But also, we have a track that I think is really necessary to NASCAR. Darlington's one of the originals, right? One of the great historic places. And there was a time where it was in danger, right? And now it's not, and the racing is great. So I'm looking forward to seeing that, as we always do. And I think no reason to think we won't have great racing as we have the last few years there. As far as who's going to win it, this is the interesting thing, right? I think Ford can really have some success at a track like this. So I'm gonna try and speak it into existence, right? I've spent some time right here. The pick would be to go Brad, right? You go, well, maybe if Buescher had this speed, maybe Brad figures something out and Keselowski gets it done. I'm gonna go against that a little bit. Penske was not great today. Ryan Blaney ended up getting back in the mix there at the end, but Penske did not have great speed. But I will say that Penske has some speed in this instance. And how about a throw at the wall here? Let's go with Austin Cindric, the third Penske driver, the forgotten Penske driver who has had limited success in the Cup Series. Of course, started it off as big as you can by winning the Daytona 500, but hasn't been great since then. I'll take Cindric in a shocker at Darlington, and we'll see how that plays out, right? We've gotten a couple of these picks right over the last few weeks. This one maybe a little less likely to get it right, but I think it's a lot more fun. So we'll go with Austin Cindric at Darlington, and I can't wait for it. Keep tuning in. Keep checking us out here. Like, comment, subscribe. What a race it was. Kansas, the closest finish in the history of NASCAR. That'll do it for us here on Four Tire Change this week. But as always, we will be back next week with our recap of Darlington and a preview, a look ahead to the All-Star race.